Excuse me.
You gotta get that one out.
Have to get the sneeze out.
We gotta get that sneeze out.
You have to edit that out.
I don't know. I might keep it in because it's funny. This is some
Anything
heavy
else to
stuff
say
we're
on
dealing with.
bound?
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah K. Regli, and today we have with us once again my wonderful grandparents who have been so gracious as to let me interview them in their home. Today we're going to talk about some communication skills, and they are premarital counselors. They've been doing this for 33 years, and they know what they're doing. So let's dive into the questions, all right?
Okay.
All right. How can a couple navigate making compromises when they're making life choices together?
When you have two differing opinions, there are several ways that you can deal with that. And one is compromise. That's probably the most common one. But there are other things that you can do besides compromising. You can come up with a whole new idea. Then you sometimes come to a situation where you agree to disagree because you can't seem to come to an agreement. And if it isn't some really important thing, then you can agree to disagree. It seems like there's another one.
There is where you take either person's as the choice, and the other one backs off and says, "Okay, we'll do it your way." So it's either one or the other gives up on what their idea is. Compromise is one where basically you're taking part of one and part of the other and putting them together. Probably the strongest way to resolve the issue is what's called a creative alternative, which is what Grandma just said a minute ago, where you scrap both your independent ideas, talk over the kinds of things that you want to include, and then together come up with the alternative that would probably be the strongest to hang on to. The problem with the other ones is the one that gives up tends to want to push back in at a later date and kind of worm their way back into doing it their way, and so therefore you haven't really resolved the issue. Whereas with a creative alternative, you've both put into it and you both have ownership for it, and ownership is the key to having what starts off as a disagreement into something where now you both are supporting it.
How would you say is the best way to go about having these conversations? Because there tends to be, with many couples, one person tends to be kind of the choice maker, and then the other person seems to be the follower. I'll go along with what you do. How can there become a more balanced dynamic in that relationship where they're making choices together?
I would say the two most important to me are, don't try to resolve these things when you're tired. You should both be fresh, relaxed, so that you've got a good opportunity to absorb some of the stress that's going to be there, because if you're tired, you're not going to be able to do that. That's a key. The other one is, I think both parties would recognize who the stronger verbal person is. There's usually one that'll dominate and the other one will kind of take a relent and back off type of, and the stronger one has to learn to be disciplined, to keep their mouth shut and allow the other one to have their say rather than come off and come off with the voice of authority, and so it basically intimidates the quiet one to just not say anything or yield to the other one when you really haven't come up with an alternative. It's still the strong vocal one that's winning out.
What kind of language is useful when you're dealing with conflict?
Seems to me that one or the other of you needs to say, I don't think we're in a very good place right now. I think we need to talk this through and come up with a different solution to this problem. And I think one person needs to do that. Usually what happens is the wife, you go to bed at night and the wife starts crying. and then the husband tries to figure out what's wrong. In the first place, it's an awful time to try to figure it out. And in the second place, you probably are not going to resolve the conflict with that kind of a situation. So long before you start feeling like you want to cry and get attention that way, it would be better to say, I am feeling like we have a situation here that we need to talk about.
And what this is pointing out is there's usually nonverbal cues to tell you ahead of time that there's an issue that needs to get worked out. And so basically, the nonverbal language is used to kind of prepare the way that lets you know there's something going on that needs to be discussed. Then if you're, not tired, if you're in a position where you can hear each other and speak clearly, then that basically is probably a good time. And I think one of the important things is you've heard some of the things that have gone on ahead of time, so that basically if there's any area of agreement, you start with that, where you've both come up with something that you think is real good. And you can also reinforce that by the one who heard it complimenting the one who said it. I think you've got a good idea here. I think we should incorporate that in whatever we come up with. So if you start off with these positive things and don't tear right into it, say, well, you came up, it's a critical type. Don't start with critical. Start with common. And then as you move along, reach into those things that are basically difficult things, and then give the person an opportunity to clarify and confirm what you heard. And that's very important, because if you've got a misinterpretation of what was said, of course you're not going to resolve it, because you're really not aware of the problem. You may be aware of the symptom of the problem, but it's important to tackle the problem itself and not just work on a symptom.
That's so good. So
and
good.
Stay away from you statements.
Stay away. What can you explain to the audience, Grandma, what you statements mean?
You make me mad, or what you did makes me mad, or if you wouldn't do this, I wouldn't feel this way.
Oh, okay.
It's an accusatory kind of thing.
It's designed to put people on the defensive. Is what it's designed to do.
Yeah, and there's also so many times when people do hurtful things, oftentimes they're not even aware of it, or they weren't even thinking about. The problem is they weren't thinking about their spouse when they did that thing. They were thinking about something else, which is why they did the thoughtless, hurtful thing to begin with.
So you say, I feel. That's a real good thing. I feel this way, or I believe, or something that tells what position you're in, but is not putting the other person on the defensive.
And some people think if I start off with I believe or I feel, then they come up with you are, put the you in, or it's hard to leave it out. So if it's something that is usually part of the way you speak, then you've got to really concentrate to frame it in such a way that you don't put the other one on the defensive.
Okay, what is a good way to create boundaries with friends or family who try to impose themselves in your relationship? Whether that be if you're the single dude who used to go out and hang out with your guys and watch the games together all the time, but now you're married and you have a family. You have parents that expect you to be at Sunday family dinner every day, and that doesn't seem realistic. How do you create those boundaries when you're in this new relationship, in this new phase of your life, without disrespecting those relationships?
This is very important to get worked out, because if you allow these, I would say, crossing over lines that are in your head or mental, if you continue to do that, you're going to build some resentment and hurt, because you haven't put a boundary and you've allowed yourself to be victimized in your mind, or maybe otherwise too, but it's not healthy. So boundaries are important to put in.
I think, first of all, you have to be courageous enough to say, my spouse is now my highest human priority, and sometimes it isn't convenient for us to come for Sunday dinner, or sometimes some of your needs really conflict with things that we already have in place. But we had something in our marriage because Grandpa's parents lived in New York and my parents lived in Kansas, and I was an only child. And they expect that you would be there for holidays. That's something that they really expect. And so we said, we believe we should have our own traditions for the holidays. And so we're not going to travel on holidays to come and see you, but you are always welcome to come and spend the holiday with us.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point too, where rather than phrasing in a way like, we're rejecting Sunday dinners with you, we're rejecting Monday night football with you, it's more of, we can continue this relationship on our terms because we're in this new phase that, I can't go out to the bar with you on Monday nights anymore, but hey, you can come to our home with my family once a month for Monday night football. You create the new parameters in which something can happen so people feel valued, but also recognize that things aren't going to be the same anymore. And life you are in a new phase and your priorities have shifted, but that doesn't mean you're not important anymore.
Right.
What are different love languages and why are they important in relationships? So there's physical touch, there's words of affirmation,
quality time, and gift
giving, and there's one more.
Affirmation,
acts of service. Acts of
Yeah.
service is the fifth one. So those are the 5 love languages. And why is knowing this about yourself and knowing this about your spouse, or if you're dating your person you're dating, so important?
Right.
Well, without thinking, what you tend to do is treat the other person the way you want to be treated. But if their love language is not the same as yours, then what you're doing is a waste of time because it's just not sticking with them. If quality time is your spouse's love language and you're doing acts of service, it doesn't really mean anything because you've denied them what they need and you're giving them something that they couldn't care less about.
And I think men, often the physical touch is the most important thing. And sometimes that is the last thing a woman really wants because, I've got so much to do and so many responsibilities and that takes time. And so you really do have to work out, I don't know if a schedule is right, but you have to work out times that you can devote to your spouse's love language.
Yeah.
And there's lots of times that people have more than one love language, and the top 2 are pretty close. For instance, quality time and words of encouragement are often 2 of the most popular love languages. And it's hard to necessarily do one without the other. So I think that guys like physical touch and girls like words of encouragement and quality time. And those are the things that require a lot of thinking about so that you're intentional about meeting the other one's love language.
And I think it's all right to talk about what your love language is. If your needs aren't being met, I think it's fine to talk about it. And
because they might be trying really hard in other ways. It's like not even that they don't love you, it's just they're doing everything that you just don't care about. Like, you're cleaning the whole house. I'm like, I don't care about the house. Like, I don't want to talk to you, and you're running around doing dishes. Like, come over here.
Right.
There's a lot of topics that come up in a relationship that we cover in premarital because we don't want people to stumble across this stuff at the most inopportune time. So we'll ask the question, what's your primary love language? And that way the other one will know right then if they didn't know before.
And sometimes you have to be very direct about it. After Grandpa retired,
I know it's coming.
Oh no! Uh-oh.
I said, you know what, hon? You have retired, but I haven't. I still have all the things to do that I've always had to do. And so now that you have more time, it would be great if you would step up to the plate and help me with some of those things.
There you go.
And he did.
All right,
He
but you had
did
to
it.
tell him that.
I had to tell him.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he wouldn't figure that
He can't
out
read your mind.
necessarily. That's the way I felt. So I was pretty direct about it.
But it's also, this is where, this was the last video where you said response versus react. Because maybe you might start building resentment because he's over there like reading or something and you're doing all the stuff. And you chose to respond and say, I need your help in X, Y, and Z, rather than react like, you never, back to you and I, you never help with the dishes and you're just sitting on your butt all, like it's choosing to have the respectful response. Okay, what is a good way to approach your spouse or your dating partner or something if they have lied to you or they didn't disclose really important information? So there's some realm of dishonesty. How do you start that conversation in a respectful way, in a non-reactive way?
You need to let them know that it hurts you deeply when they try to hide something from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
I feel like there's a lack of honesty in our relationship now.
There's a problem with lying because it's a root cause of a lot of other things that'll crop up.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when you make a choice, there's usually consequences. Some of them are intended. A lot of them are unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think those consequences and choices come from? Well, a lot of them that are bad come from fear.
Mm-hmm.
What causes the fear? Now we're to the root.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to really look for root causes and don't look for the symptoms, which is in the wanting to deflect what you've really done. And one of the blooms of that is terrible, actually not a bloom, it's a dead branch that happens, and that's the issue of trust. When you lie, you have now betrayed trust. And trust takes a long time to build, but it can be destroyed in an instant. And so one little instance of where you have told a lie will destroy the truth in the relationship that could take years to recover from.
Trust.
And that's why this is so important.
And I think it's important for if people grow up in families where casual lying is the norm.
Right.
Like, because some people, I honestly believe they don't even recognize it as being a thing because their parents lied to them, their siblings lied, their friends all lied, everyone around them would just lie about small little things that they may not even realize, hey, this can steal a very good thing away from you.
And you have to realize that there are different forms of things that are really lying. For instance, if you exaggerate what's really going on, that's a form of a lie. If you minimize, that's no big. If you minimize what really happened, that's another form of lying. So you can't just say, well, I didn't lie, or that's a white lie, or that's a fib. That's minimizing the seriousness of what you're doing in the relationship.
I mean, and there's also the thing of not disclosing important things. Where you believe yourself to be in such a intimate relationship where you would know certain things, and then it was just not told to you.
Right.
And so you can feel betrayed. People may feel betrayed in that situation as well. It's like, oh, I thought I knew you, but there was this big debt that you never told me about. And I'm not mad about the debt, but like, why didn't you tell me about it? Or, oh, you used to be married. Like, I'm not mad that you used to be married, but why didn't you tell me this? We could have talked about how we could grow as a new family,
That's one of the things we bring up is secrets. Do you have any secrets that would harm your relationship if they were found out later on? And so we ask that direct question.
Who you're married to should be someone where you don't feel like you have to live in fear or shame. And I think the dishonesty usually leads from that. Like they're afraid they're going to lose something if they find out, or they're ashamed of something from their past and they don't want to talk about it. And if that's at a core issue in your relationship, is that there's something surrounding that, whether that be baggage they just brought with them, or there's some dynamic of the relationship that has brought that to become a thing. Like that's kind of the core of what, like the root of what needs to be taken care of in order to make amends with yourself and other people.
Right, exactly.
What is a good way to handle a situation if your spouse has cheated on you? So if someone discovers this, either emotional or sexual, how should they begin processing this situation?
What do you want to do?
This is such a heavy question.
This is hard to hit directly because it's probably either something that is a total shock and total surprise, or the spouse has had an inkling that there's something going on, but that hasn't been discussed or tried to get resolved. And lots of times you need a third party involved to mediate and help both parties through the hurt and all the things that are involved emotionally in the realization that that relationship is fractured, maybe even broken, and they're not realizing it, or they're not willing to face that. And so you've got to, first of all, get things so that you're both looking at it, what's the truth of the situation. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Don't try to make it less than it is, or something that is going to be more easily digested by everyone. You have to be willing to admit how serious it is.
And I think that's a good point, to bring someone else in to kind of mediate the situation. And it may be somebody, that you're close to, that would keep the confidentiality. We've been called in sometimes because a couple trusts us, and so they would come to us first.
And sometimes we just speak to the same sex one first. I'll talk to the guy. Joyce will talk to the girl. We'll see where they are and try to get things moved along a little bit, and then we'll put it together to get the resolution taken care of. But sometimes we have to prepare them for the kinds of things that are going to have to take place in order for this to be fixed.
Yeah, and then that also kind of goes back to what you said at the beginning, where whether if it's a complete shock versus someone kind of felt something was brewing, but they didn't ever have like evidence, or a clear reason to say anything about it, where they will be emotionally might be very different from each other.
Right.
And a problem that has often happened but not resolved is pornography. We've had that to deal with over and over again because it's so rampant, but it's not talked about.
Yeah, they say like 70%, like a huge amount.
Would you believe in the 90s, high 90s?
I wouldn't even be surprised.
And if you find out that your spouse is into pornography, it makes you feel like you are not adequate for them in the relationship, and trust is certainly broken, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to get over those problems.
Well, awesome. That's all the questions that I have.
Well, it's been our pleasure to be participants in this. We've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you. I'm glad you get a little bit of what I do with all my free time, and I'm grateful.
We have a new appreciation for what you do.
And all the work that goes into this. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you to my wonderful grandparents, Jim and Joyce Clutz, for helping me make all these videos, and hopefully we may see you back. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows what the future may hold?
Stay tuned.
You'll stay tuned. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.